Okay, is your baptism invalid if your baptizer was an adulterer? Well, picture this. You decided to become a real follower of Christ. Good for you. And you realized that you needed to be baptized, because that's the first step in obedience to Jesus Christ. And your pastor was more than willing to baptize you. But 2 weeks later you found out that he actually lived in sin. Your pastor had a secret relationship with another woman. What would that mean to your baptism? Okay, and this is what we call Donatism. Donatism is the teaching which says that the effectiveness of the sacraments depends on the moral character of the one who is ministering them to you or to others. This means that if you have been baptized by the aforementioned pastor, your baptism is totally invalid. This teaching, or I would rather say heresy, is what I said called Donatism. Now it might sound a bit weird, but this teaching came forth out of persecution. Somewhere in 303 AD, the Roman Emperor Diocletian ordered the persecution of Christians. He commanded that the sacred writings and the churches had to be destroyed. A year later he also commanded that everybody had to bring honor to the gods of the empire, the Roman Empire that is. Many Christians refused this. However, there were also Christians who freely handed over the sacred writings and even betrayed other Christians to the persecutors. These traitors became known under the name traditor, which means the ones who had handed over. The word traditor comes from the Latin transditio, from trans, across, and dare, to hand, to give. And it is the source of the modern word traitor and the modern word treason. One of these traditors, Felix, Bishop of Aptunga, was in 311 AD involved by the consecration of Bishop Cecilian of Carthage. Felix was thought to be guilty of giving away copies of the Bible to the Roman persecutors. This episode actually stirred up a huge debate about the validity of the consecration of the bishop. Around 70 bishops organized a synod and declared that the consecration wasn't done by a sincere Christian and had to be invalid. But this raised even more questions. What does this mean to the other sacraments? What about communion? Marriage, baptism I already mentioned, but what does it mean to them? Yes, how about being blessed into marriage by a Christian who sinned big time against other Christians? Later, Aelius Donatus the Great became Bishop of Carthage. And I'm apologizing for not pronouncing these names correctly, but anyway, you know what I mean. Aelius Donatus the Great became bishop. And you might have guessed it, but this teaching is actually named after him. The Donatists were becoming more popular, which caused a big division in the church. One of the big issues was what I already said, baptism. They actually went as far as to rebaptize people of whom they believe were baptized by those who sinned greatly. In doing so, they separated themselves from all other churches and basically upheld themselves as the one and only authoritative church body. The teaching of the Donatists was finally condemned as a heresy in the Synod of Arles in 314 AD. The matter of the Donatist controversy was also brought up during multiple ecumenical councils and eventually presented to Emperor Constantine in 316 AD. On each occasion, the appointment or consecration of the aforementioned Bishop Cecilian was affirmed. So they actually said his appointment was still valid. Nevertheless, despite the persecution, by 350 AD, the Donatists had amassed many followers, surpassing the Orthodox population in northern Africa. However, it was Augustine's apologetic argument in which he argued that the effect of a sacrament is independent of the moral character of the minister, that shifted the balance in favor of the Orthodox and ultimately led to the decline of the Donatist movement in the following century. Now, what might be the problem? I think that Donatism poses a problem because no one is morally flawless. I'm just going to throw in Romans 3 verse 23 again, just as a reminder. Here Paul says, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." If absolute holiness is required to serve God, then we are all unfit. Even if the minister's moral character is questionable or proven to be flawed, the effectiveness of baptism or the Lord's Supper or whatever remains intact. The sacraments hold power because they symbolize spiritual truths. It is God who works through them, and his ability is not limited by the moral condition of the person administering them. Now, depending on how strictly you define Donatism, I would like to argue that many historical movements have been and are, in a sense, Donatists. Whenever they create a class of Christians who are superior to others and denounce others as non-believers because they are not as devoted as they are. Donatism seems to be still around us. Just see how we look at each other and talk about each other. You know, that those crazy progressive Christians, those traditional evangelicals. And what about these indecisive Episcopalians? Unfortunately, the manner in which these labels are employed goes beyond mere description. They are used to creating divisions between those who are considered pure and impure, righteous and unrighteous, holy and godless. Pick any controversial topic and you'll come across a bunch of folk who firmly believe that if you don't share their views, you're actually tarnishing the very essence of faith and the church, oh you unrepented sinner. Now, to get back to the original Donatists, they started to rebaptize people because they believed their first baptism wasn't valid. And you might think this doesn't play a role in our time anymore, but then I would say think twice. I mean, I look at my own life. When I wanted to be baptized, I asked the church elders whether my boss, who led me to Christ in the first place, could do it. My boss attended a different church, and yeah, the elders in my church had a very difficult time to allow him to do it. Their reasoning? Well, he wasn't a member of our church, and he isn't an elder. Now, I didn't know much about the Bible yet, but I fully understand the implications of their reasoning. My baptism had to be done by one of them, and else it wasn't real enough, or something like that. I told them that I wasn't in the mood of this kind of bickering, so I said that I would be just as happy to go to the beach and to get baptized there. That wasn't even a big deal because I lived close to the beach. Well, for them this was even a bigger shock. So they agreed that one of them would baptize me with the help of my boss. Now, what about Jesus? Jesus faced a similar situation back in his time. Some Pharisees were unhappy and asked in Matthew 9 verse 11, "Why eateth your master with publicans and sinners?" In response, Jesus said in the following verses, "They that be whole need not a physician, but they that are sick. But go ye and learn what that meaneth. I will have mercy and not sacrifice, for I am not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." The Pharisees believed that Jesus and his followers would be contaminated by eating with sinners and tax collectors. However, Jesus turned this perspective around. It's not Jesus who gets corrupted by being around sinners, but rather the sinners who find healing by being in contact with Jesus. Now we need to be careful. First, let's read a parable Jesus gave to counter the self-righteousness of people. Let's go to Luke 18 verse 9 to 11. "And he spake this parable unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and despised others. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee, that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give tithe to all that I possess. And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For every one that exalteth himself shall be ashamed, and he that humbled himself shall be exalted. Now this story takes an unexpected turn when the Pharisee, who is impressing everyone with his performance at the temple, leaves empty-handed. He never asks for anything from God, and as a result he receives nothing. On the other hand, the despised tax collector, despite his flaws, humbly asks for God's mercy and is justified, finding himself in a right relationship with God. Now likewise, the Donatists return home without receiving anything. They possess such unwavering faith in their own righteousness and purity that they deem themselves self-sufficient, requiring nothing from God. Their sole plea to him might be to ensure that the impure tax collectors remain far away, so as not to taint their holiness. Okay, I do understand the possible problems that can arise here, right? I mean, how to deal with a baptism conducted by a transgender pastor. Clearly, Orthodoxy will not acknowledge this pastor. However, does that make the baptism invalid? Does it mean that the person who got baptized didn't have proper faith? I mean, many young believers have not a very real good understanding of what is orthodoxy and what not. People grow up in a time where they are being taught that certain things are perfectly fine, right? It is only later, after they start to study God's word, that they start to understand the nitty-gritty of the Christian faith. When they repented, they were like babies, trusting the adults around them for proper care and education. I think we cannot just dismiss someone's baptism merely because it was administered by a sinner. However, when that specific person who got baptized just wants to be baptized by this cool transgender pastor, and he or she doesn't care anything about the sacrament himself, yeah, that makes it a little bit different. If the only goal was to make it on the front cover of some cool magazine, yes, that would change the matter big time. But can it really be that the Lord ignores someone's baptism because the baptizer wasn't right with God? I don't believe so. So how about communion? Do you think the Lord will keep his blessing from the partakers because the person who is handing out the bread had a secret affair? It becomes actually more complicated, of course, when the partakers know this and still allow the person to hand out the bread and the wine. Now the sacrament isn't taken serious by the congregation, and that is a totally different ball play. Nevertheless, we still have to be very careful when it comes to God's work. We need to realize time and again that we are all sinners. In Jesus we are saved by his blood, receiving forgiveness for our wrongdoings because of his abundant grace that he generously gives to everyone. It's not based on our own purity or the purity of the church, and therefore we express our gratitude to God. In any case, let me know what you think. You can do that in the comments below. Maybe you disagree on certain things, just leave me a comment. Please remember, I'm mostly active on my Apologeet channel, and you'll find a link to that channel in the description of this video or on my website. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to receive a notification every time I upload a new video. I very much appreciate your prayers and your support. Please take a look in the description again or on my website to see how you can help me. And also I will place a link to both the Dutch and English transcripts below. For now, I want to wish you God's rich blessing. Thank you for watching, and Lord willing, we'll see each other in the next video.
Thank you for watching this video. You can give me a thumbs up if you liked it. You can also subscribe to my channel, or even better, follow me on Odyssey. That way you will never miss a new video. You will find all the links in the description below.